Alright, and so last year at Christmas I had the M1 MacBook Pro, and recently now I have the M1 MacBook Air. And so I just want to do a quick video just comparing the two and talking about the MacBook Air M1. Now we all know the M1 chip has been amazing in the performance, and so in this video we're going to see how it fares out against the M1 MacBook Pro as well. And so let's get into it. Alright, and so first of all, I have the baseline MacBook Air. I have the M1 MacBook Air with 8GB of RAM and 256GB of an SSD storage. Meanwhile, on the M1 MacBook Pro here, I have the maxed out version with 16GB of RAM, 2TB SSD. And so the M1 MacBook Air, the baseline, has an 8-core CPU with only a 7-core GPU. Meanwhile, the M1 MacBook Pro has an 8-core CPU and an 8-core GPU. So the M1 MacBook Air baseline model is missing one GPU core. Now, both of these are 13-inch. Meanwhile, they look the exact same, except when you open it up, one has the touch bar, which is the MacBook Pro, and the other does not. Now, both of these are identical in every way from the design, except for that touch bar there. And also, the fingerprint sensor on the M1 MacBook Pro is bigger than the one on the M1 MacBook Air. And so, everything else is the same, keyboard's the same, the screen's the same, everything else is the same, except for obviously performance. Because of the extra GPU core and the more gigabytes of RAM. Now, when skimming through the M1 MacBook Air, I really feel no difference between the M1 MacBook Air and the M1 MacBook Pro. They feel almost identical, except for when video editing, you can tell the difference a little bit from the performance of the M1 MacBook Pro to the performance of the M1 MacBook Air. The M1 MacBook Pro is a better video editor, but you really can't edit 4K video. You can on the M1 MacBook Air, and so I can edit my 4K videos in HDR on the M1 MacBook Air, and normally the M1 MacBook Air isn't supposed to be able to do that. I know my MacBook Air, my old one over there, is from 2018, so it's not that old, but it's decently old, and it is only a dual core compared to an 8-core, so that's 6 extra cores. The M1 has 4 high performance cores and 4 high efficiency cores, and implementing it into the MacBook Air has been amazing for those who want budget performance. And I gotta say, the M1 MacBook Air is amazing for the price, because you can do all the 4K editing, you can do everything you can do on a MacBook Pro, but you will feel the difference a little bit, not even noticeable in a way, but you will still feel it when scrubbing through tracks or anything like that, but it's very minor. And so if you went ahead and bought the MacBook Air, it's an amazing computer. So to be honest, there's really not much to talk about in this video, because I've gone over everything in the MacBook Pro. I'll put that link right up there, and the MacBook Air chip is the exact same. The performance will be a bit less because it has, again, less gigabytes of RAM, one less GPU core, but all in all, everything's the exact same, design-wise as well, except for the touch bar, and that's pretty much it. So again, the M1 MacBook Pro video will be right up there, and yeah. So let me know down in the comments below what you guys think about the M1 chip, and specifically the M1 MacBook Air, and let me know down in the comments below if you guys have the M1 MacBook Air or the M1 MacBook Pro. Let me know down in the comments below. Alright guys, thank you for watching. Please do go out and have a great day, and we shall see you in the next one.